Broadcasting from the Cass Corridor in Detroit, this is The Metro. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the program, the legacy of hip-hop producer and MC J. Dilla is rooted in Detroit and stretches across the world. We'll explore his impacts on music and culture ahead of an event happening at Pershing High School.
And a melody of bird songs is punctuating the spring air. We'll learn about the birds of Southeast Michigan, their migration patterns, and the vital role they play for people and the environment.
Plus, some legal scholars are concerned about President Trump's refusal to follow court orders. We'll look at what all this could mean for Michiganders.
But first, what will Michigan's economy look like 1 year from now? What about even just 6 months? These are the pressing questions that people in the auto industry, that is, the folks who operate 20% of our state's economy, are asking. They're asking these questions because President Donald Trump's tariffs have many people on edge. Auto suppliers are concerned tariffs will devastate their businesses. Meanwhile, automakers worry they'll drive up the cost of cars and reduce sales. Those companies could bear almost $42 billion in annual costs from the tariffs. That's according to a report commissioned by Detroit's automakers. So what should we make of this? How might tariffs affect workers? And why is UAW President Shawn Fain in favor of the tariffs? To discuss all this, we have Marick Masters here. He's a professor of business emeritus at Wayne State University and an expert on organized labor. He's also an author, commentator, consultant, and podcaster. Professor Masters, thanks for joining us on the Metro.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So we've already seen some consequences that have come after the tariffs have been in place. I'm thinking about earlier this month when Stellantis temporarily laid off about 900 workers in Michigan and Indiana who supply auto parts to factories in Canada and Mexico. And around the same time, Stellantis paused production at its Warren truck assembly plant over a shortage of engines. Over 1,000 workers were affected. Is it fair for us to attribute these things to the tariffs?
Well, I don't think it's fair to attribute them necessarily directly or only to the tariffs. I think there are other factors at play, such as demand for products. The tariffs on auto just went into effect on April the 2nd. And the tariffs on auto parts will not go into effect until May the 3rd, although the tariffs on parts from China have gone into effect, and they are the most extreme of all. But I think that what we can expect to see over the next 3 to 6 months is a lot of volatility, a lot of uncertainty on the part of the automakers and also the consumers, which will have to play itself out until this set of tariff negotiations get settled and there's some order restored to the system.
So right now, it's really just about these conversations about tariffs. Just even uttering the word tariff is having impacts already before we're seeing the concrete impacts.
Well, I think that that's a fair assessment, particularly when it comes to the stock market and the bond market. The volatility of those markets recently reflects underlying concerns about the future direction of the economy, the stability in the price of the dollar, as well as whether we're going to go into a recession or see increases in interest rates. All of those things, to the extent that they actually play out and happen, will have a major impact on the auto industry, perhaps greater than the tariffs per se. But clearly the tariffs are going to be expensive for consumers, especially to the extent that the auto companies pass them on, and I don't believe they can absorb them all. And also, they could depress demand as a result of these price increases. This is really cost-push inflation, that demand for products will go down because the companies can't produce as much of them because they're more expensive, and therefore, and they're higher priced, and therefore, you're going to see a recession of some sort. So it's a complicated thing when you come to tariffs, but it's important to keep your eye on the ball, so to speak, in the sense that increasing tariffs will result in increased prices, and that those increased prices will suppress demand for the vehicles, which will reduce the revenues and profits to the automobile companies, which could ultimately lead to additional layoffs. So it will affect both consumers and workers adversely.
Sure. Yeah. This is going to have a lot of effects on local folks, on ordinary citizens. I've heard a lot of numbers, not a lot. I'll say I've heard some numbers thrown out about how much prices for cars could increase. What do you think is like a likely range?
Well, let's take a $50,000 car that's imported from Mexico or China. The way things stand now, and Trump has indicated he will grant some sort of relief, but just the price of the motor vehicle. When the vehicle comes across the border from Mexico, let's say, and the price at that transaction is $50,000, the 25% tariff will apply to the portion of the car that is not manufactured with U.S. goods. So on average, about 50% of the products that make up a car are not U.S. made. So half of that, 25% will be taxed on $25,000, which could result in a $5,700 increase in prices if they were passed on directly to the consumer. Now, some of them will probably be absorbed by the manufacturer, but clearly not all of them. But it's uncertain now what kind of relief the president has in mind. But I think you can expect to see that these tariffs are going to go up because this is really a broader effort to do three things, the long-term effects of which will be harder to foresee. And one is to rebalance the trade system to make it more favorable to the United States in terms of tariff rates and non-tariff barriers across the countries. And also, very importantly, the eye is on China. He wants to substantially reduce the economic clout of China, which he perceives as a national security threat. There are also ancillary goals which are very important concerning the border security, and that involves the question of the importing of fentanyl, which goes again to China. And I think that all of those things are wrapped into one ball of wax, which makes it very hard for businesses to make calculations about what the future is going to look like. And businesses, while they are impacted by what happens today and tomorrow and the next day, 3 months from now, they're thinking about what are these tariffs going to be 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, because that's how they make calculations as to where to make investments. Are they going to put something back here in the United States to build that will put them at a cost disadvantage if those tariffs disappear?
Professor Masters, something that's striking when we think about these tariffs is that UAW President Shawn Fain is in favor of them. Let's listen to him speaking to MSNBC defending them.
They can afford this, and the fear that they want to put out there as Wall Street's having a meltdown is the fact that they want to make people afraid of this because they don't want to share.
As briefly as you can, what do you make of Fain's argument that the auto companies are against the tariffs because they simply don't want to share and they're being greedy?
Well, I think that's a common argument that is made to companies against the companies. People blame company greed as the basis for their reluctance to support tariffs and that they can't afford it. But the fact of the matter is they have enormous capital expenditure requirements. It's very difficult to relocate plants and production. It's not one for one. I mean, if you can't find a car that you wanted that's imported from Mexico, you may not find it elsewhere in the United States, even though it's made by the same company. And therefore, the consumer preferences are harder to meet when you import such a large percentage of your cars from Mexico and Canada and Japan and South Korea and Germany. So therefore, literally half of the imports of cars in the United States are from these companies, these countries, and it's very difficult to calibrate what the situation is going to be in the future when you need to make decisions about where to make investments.
Now, on Monday, President Trump said he was considering making exemptions for tariffs that could affect America's auto industry. If he suspended tariffs on auto-related products, what kinds of consequences do you think we'll see for the auto companies, as briefly as you can?
Well, I think it will cause they won't know what to do. On the one hand, they could try to build up inventory and get things across the border so that they don't have to slap tariffs on the consumers. But that anticipates continued demand for those products, which if the economy were to go into a recession would not be the case. Then they'd be stuck with all these cars here that they brought in and avoided paying the tariffs on that they can't sell. So I really think that they're going to have a difficult time planning until they get some assurance. But I think one thing is certain, once he finally pulls the trigger on these tariffs, I think that you will see price increases. But, with Trump, here's what you have to keep in mind continually. He is a negotiator. He believes in tariffs as a tool. And I think that what he's looking for actually is a couple of big deals with various countries, including the European Union, Mexico, Vietnam, that can be emulated more broadly. Those will bring overall tariffs and non-tariff barriers down. And then he's going to isolate China economically through deals with various countries in order to try and put the pinch on China, disrupt its economy, and weaken its international position. That, I think, is the end goal here. It's going to take him a few months to get there, and it will be very painful watching.
Marick Masters, professor of business emeritus at Wayne State University and an expert on organized labor. Thank you for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you very much.
Up next, tomorrow, Jay Dilla's former high school is hosting a Lupus Awareness Day in his honor. We'll learn more about the hip-hop legend. And we want to hear from you. Call in and tell us what impact Jay Dilla's music has had on you and what you see as the impact it's had on Detroit. The number is 313-577-1019. This is The Metro. Stay with us.